Have you ever just been looking at your phone case and you're just kind of thinking to yourself, like, man, how could I put tons of work into this only to make it look significantly worse than it was? Well, have I got the answer for you. Now, in the video that I was doing of my PS4, when I was showing how to paint that, which this is basically the exact same process, but as of right now, my S21 Ultra is driving me absolutely insane. One UI 4.1 just came out. There's still bugs everywhere. It's just riddled with problems. I can't fly my drone. I can't play tons of games, and it's driving me insane. I'm sick of it. I'm back on an S20 Ultra, which I've downgraded to One UI 3.1 with Android 11, and wouldn't you know it, every single thing works absolutely perfect. So this is my, retirement plan. Maybe, at some point, I'll look into getting another phone. But after playing around with the S22 Ultra versus the S21, I'm just not sold on it. It's not worth the upgrade for me. And with all of the bugs in Android 12 and One UI 4.0, 4.1, it's not happening. This is an old case that I have for that phone. Now, this is an Urban Armor Gear case. This used to be olive drab green, like military green, and then the outside here was black, and then the edges right here, and then these corners used to be orange. But because I use this case all the time when I was working on cars, I'm constantly covered in grease. Now, the case itself is really, really high quality. If the camera cutout was a little bit cleaner and closer in on the actual camera shape itself, it wouldn't have left an outline in the glass on the phone. But that's my use case. I'm using this thing underneath cars, in the engine bay, hands covered in oil, grease, dirt all the time, and this case has held up absolutely amazing. I'm gonna put some effort into this. Now, in my trial and error, I painted this outside and I got tons of dust in it, it's horrible. This was mostly for a trial because I wanted to see if it was actually going to work out. You can see that the case still bends and everything, but the paint, it's not cracking or flaking off or anything like that. But again, trial and error right here, it wasn't dry all the way through. It was only dry on the outside. And when I went to go put the case in, I pressed too hard and peeled into the paint a little bit. So I'm going to have to sand that down and redo that. But basically what's happening right now is I'm just going to sand this down with 1000 grit to make a nice smooth surface over top so I can just kind of do a finishing coat of paint, which all of the previous steps that I already went into, because I really didn't think I was going to be making a video about this, but I figured it might be kind of interesting if I can pull something out. But right now this looks like absolute garbage, so hopefully I'm gonna end up making something a little bit better than this. But ideally what I want to do is keep this gray color, which is just a generic dark gray spray paint, and then very lightly over top of it while it was still wet, I sprayed from really far away with gunmetal wheel paint, so the metal flake just kind of misted onto it. And it's really hard to see just because there's so much crap in it. So hopefully if I actually come a little bit closer, maybe you can see it, but there's tons of little silver and dark gray metal flake in the gloss gray, and it's a really cool effect. And right now this has matte clear coat over top of it, which is the same clear coat that I used in the PS4 video. So what I'm thinking is just taking 1000 grit, I'm gonna knock all these sand marks down and everything where there's just a bunch of garbage that got stuck into the paint or whatever. I'm just gonna do a very light coat of gray over top of it, mist the metal flake again, and then from that point I'm gonna do gloss clear coat. So hopefully I get a much better finish on this. So the first step is going to be washing the case, making sure that anything on it is not. So this is just dish soap and a sponge so I can get rid of any oil or grease or anything from my hands. There's still quite a few little imperfections that I want to get rid of, and then same with right in here. But this whole flat surface here is pretty much good. So something to keep in mind, just constantly move the sandpaper over and never focus in one area. So don't just sit here constantly on this one spot and then move over. Do the entire problem area in one big sweep, or a routine pattern of constantly going back and forth for the entire thing. And already that is starting to look a lot better. But I'm gonna finish this up, so I'll just do a mist coat of the adhesion promoter. And unlike the PS4, this one here is gris foncé. This is dark gray, and I'm just gonna do again a mist coat over top just to make sure there's coverage on everything. I'm gonna leave it like this, and then I'm gonna take this. This is like some super old gunmetal gray wheel paint. I found this in the garage. I'm not entirely sure how long I've had it, but by the looks of it, years. It still works. So again, mist coat over top. So now I gotta let that sit for about 5 minutes. All right, so I'm completely done with the adhesion promoter. I already finished that up just because like it's boring, it's clear, it doesn't really matter. And I flipped this around. It was really hard to get in the box to actually get like the side pieces. So now I'm gonna do the gray, just very lightly. Touch up the edges. Now, before this has time to dry at all. Yep. Okay. There we are. So now you can kinda get an idea of what I was talking about. Gray, but there's metal flake in it. It's not like metallic where there's tons of metal flake. It's just a tiny little bit kind of sprinkled around it. Okay, it's clear coat time. So I'm going to hopefully not have this fall off. Now I'm hoping that I'll be able to get under here enough to get that edge. It's gonna kind of suck, but hopefully I can do it. Because I really don't want to have to do this in 2 parts and then let it dry and then flip it over, and I don't know, I'm just not into it. Let's hope this works. Now I can just do a super light coat on this. Oh, it almost looks like it has like a matte finish. But as I put more, it'll start like becoming a lot more shiny. But ideally I just want to have like very, very fine coats on there. So that way it'll dry really quick and I can build up more coats faster. So that way when I go to sand it, there's more clear coat to sand through and I won't burn through. So now I can just let this dry and then I'll just keep doing more coats, and I'll just kind of show you the last coat that I do, because I'm going to do that one a little bit heavier just to try and get rid of like some of the aggressiveness from it, because right now it's going on so thin that it's like particles stacking up, so it's going to be a really coarse surface. So the very last coat that I do is going to be a little bit heavier, so that way it's going to act as kind of like a barrier that's going to take all of those like peaks of like the little particles put together, and it's going to kind of like blend them all into one. But it's going to be a really like big thick coating of clear coat that I can sand back down to like an acceptable amount, but it'll be completely flat. And this case is like, it's gonna look like a mirror. Like it's gonna be ridiculously shiny. It's essentially, it's just gonna match the phone. Coat number 5. And this is the heavy coat. Well, heavier. So now you can really see what I was talking about with the, like the metal flake, but it still looks like gray. I don't know. It's really hard to explain. Like if you look at something metallic, it's metallic like from all angles. Where if you look at something that's gloss, like for instance, the entire side of this right now just looks completely gray. You can't see any of the metal flake at all. And only in the spots where the light's reflecting, that's where you're seeing the metal flake. So it makes it incredibly sparkly. But then when you're looking from angles, it's just gray. So I feel like that came out pretty good. And honestly, the finish on this is so smooth that I think I'm only going to have to wet sand with 2000 and then polish it out. Because it is really, really smooth. But I'm going to put this down before any dust gets in it because it's very wet still. Just going to leave that there. And then in about 2 or 3 days, once this is actually cured for a while, that's when I will wet sand the whole case down. Because the paint and clear coat and everything like through it isn't going to be completely cured all the way to the bottom. So it needs to aerate for a while so that all of the solvents that are inside of it will go through all of the coatings and then out into the air. So that's it. I'll come back in a couple days when this is ready to wet sand, but for you, it'll be just like magic. Oh man, this is so cool. I can use the app again now that I'm on Android 11. Now it's been 4 days since I clear coated this. I just kind of rinsed all the dust off and everything because I don't want to sand dust into it. Like this looks pretty good as it is. And considering this is just a case, I've been debating using it like this because once it's in the garage and like I'm using this under cars or in the engine bay. This finish right here is more than acceptable for what I need, but just in the sense of completing this video, I'm going to actually finish this. Now, I just want like a really slow stream of water. Just keep everything wet. Now, I'm just gonna be using 2000 grit. Now, normally you would want to use a block just to keep everything completely flat, but because this is already so smooth, I'm really not gonna be doing that much to it. Plus these little recessed areas right in here, I'm gonna need the flexibility of just having the paper itself and my hand, because a block is gonna be too rigid and it's gonna put way too much stress on these raised areas, which is quickly gonna blow right through the clear coat into the paint. And then I'm gonna have to re-clear coat the entire thing, wait another 4 days, because this is just 1K clear, so it takes a really long time, which I don't know if you're gonna be able to pick it up, but I was doing a few little like tests on the inside here, just trying to like press my fingernail into it, and day 4, I can no longer do that. So all I'm gonna do is just quickly go around the edges to knock that down. It really doesn't need that much. This big flat area is gonna be really easy, and then just in here in these little recessed areas, that's gonna be the most problematic, trying to get it like as smooth as I can. But again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because this is a phone case and it's gonna get destroyed anyway. So now we can just very, very lightly go over and just start scuffing only on the flat areas. I'm really not pressing at all toward the edges. So I'm just gonna keep at this until it's pretty much flat. Like I'm letting the paper do the work here. I'm just holding it and then I'm bending it around the corner, so the rigidity of the paper is the amount of pressure that I'm actually pushing on this. So for a better understanding of what I'm talking about, I'll just start quickly going over this part here, which I'm just gonna be doing on like 45-degree angles on like the big flat surface, and then 45-degree in the other direction, so that way I have like 90-degree opposing sanding scratches that are hitting each other, because flat scratches are gonna be significantly easier to get out than like swirls. So as long as I keep going in only one direction and then cutting all of those scratches down in the other direction, then this should be more than fine to lightly buff out, and it'll have a pretty close to a mirror finish when it's done. Right in here, there's still a little bit that could be wet sanded right around here by the logo, but again, I don't want to go too far because of these edges, which you can see are very, very flat, so that's gonna sand down really quickly, and those might be areas where it'll blow through. And just for in here, I'm gonna fold it, so keeping the rounded edge on the rounded sides of the case is gonna be really beneficial to making sure that I don't make any like super deep scratches. And because all of these ones are almost going vertical, I'll go over again, completely bent on both sides, and just going across, and then slowly bringing it in right up toward the end. So if we just dry this off and just show how quick that actually goes, one pass going up, and then another one going across, and I've taken down this entire center part here. So I'm just gonna have to do a little cleanup pass around the edge, right in here on the centers, and then again up here, finish sanding around the edges. I'll stick with this, and I'll just show you kind of what it looks like after doing all of the 2000 grit sanding, and then we'll come over to the buffer, and I'll show you how to buff this without going too far and burning through. At least, I hope. Mistakes happen. Now that is the final sanding done, so now I can prep the buffing pad, which I probably should have washed, but it's a phone case, I'm not really too concerned. Now for the supply cost, this buffing compound here is about $100 a bottle. The 2000 grit wet sandpaper you buy in a pack for about 10 bucks. If you don't do a very good job with the clear coat, then you're going to want to do 1,000 first and then 2,000. So $20 in sandpaper. The adhesion promoter is 10 bucks. The paint was $8, and then the wheel paint was actually 20. Now it's for like the metal flake over top. So if you don't do that, then you could save 20 bucks. But I just had it on hand from other projects. And then a buffer, about $400. So realistically, if you wanted to do this on the cheap, be mindful of the clear coat, so that way you're doing like a really smooth job, and then you only need the 2,000 grit. If you don't do the metal flake, then only $8 in paint, and then 10 for the adhesion promoter, so that's only 28 bucks so far for the supplies. And then if you want to use like a headlight polishing kit, which also comes with polish and everything in it, then those are 20 bucks. So this is like less than $50, and you could do it to any case, which is about the price of cases, at least in Canada. So I could buy a brand new case for 50 bucks, or I can take this old one and modify it to make it cooler for basically the exact same price. So yes, it is a lot of work for basically the same price of just buying a new case, but with that being said, I now have a case that no one else has, so that's kind of neat. Oh, that reminds me of high school. So now I'm only going to put polish around the edge. I'm just gonna work this into the buffing wheel because I'm only gonna be using like this portion of the edge for what's actually being polished. So just work it in, prime the wheel, make sure it's really in there so it doesn't splatter everywhere. Now the buffer is on its lowest speed. I'm going to start and then I'm gonna hit the lock to hold it in place so that way I don't have to actually like manage any of this. And if things go south, then I can just quickly hit the trigger to unlock it. So if things are going south, I can just quickly hit that, knock it off, everything's fine. Probably only gonna get injured like a lot, but at least like some level of safety protocol is initiated. Now, I'm gonna explain what's going on first before I start this and you have to listen to the buffer going. But basically, this buffer is gonna be spinning anti-clockwise. So with that being said, this leading edge right here is constantly going to be pushing this direction. This one's going to be pushing in this direction. I want to take that into account for when I'm polishing. So when I'm coming with this edge here where there's a hard edge and it could grab onto this. So if I'm buffing here, this edge could grab onto that and rip this out of my hands, possibly destroying the entire case and all the work that I've just done. So by going on this side here, I'm going to be going across and it's always going to be pulling from like a leading solid surface off of the panel. So I'm going to be doing the edges on this side here, just like this. And then for the flat surface, I'm going to be going up on an angle like this, rolling across the edge, not really dragging it flat across. I want to have more of a cutting action that's cutting in lines. And I'm just going to keep doing that a few times. The amount of weight that I'm pushing on this is literally just going to be holding this in place with enough force that it's not going to be flying around. I'm not pressing into the buffer at all. Just very lightly, I'm letting the compound and the foam do all of the work to this. Because if we look on like an angle, you can already see that the case is really shiny. It's just dull because of the sanding. So all we're doing is polishing all of the tiny little 2000 grit sanding scratches. So it's really not that much work that we have to do. However, I am going to be going over it quite a few times. So I'll probably end up doing 2 passes, clean this all off, see where I'm at, and then possibly doing a third if there's any areas where I'm not fully content with it. So this is just the first pass, very lightly going over it. And you can already see how much better it looks. So after the second and then possibly third, this thing is going to have like a glass smooth finish. So I'm just going to do a few more passes and I'll show you what I come up with. Like right in this recessed area was a little bit harder to get. So I just did a third pass just to clean it up, make sure it was all perfect. And I'll just take a microfiber, make sure there are no fingerprints at all on here. That is the mirror smooth Urban Armor Gear case, just using some paint that I have in the garage and some old supplies. So technically this didn't even cost me anything because I already had everything. So for me, this was free. If you wanted to replicate this, buying all the supplies brand new, you're looking at about 50 bucks Canadian, which is pretty much the exact price of just buying a new case. However, you're not going to get something that looks like this. But I think this with a gray phone, sparkly gray case, like this lines up pretty good. So I just want to show the difference because these wheels actually have gunmetal paint on them. So just looking at the difference in the finish, these are like entirely metallic. It's shiny from every direction. This here, because it was misted over top, the metal flake stands out significantly more while just appearing to be completely gray when there's no light actually reflecting off of it. It's just a normal gray case. Then you get some light in there and boom, sparkles. So this just ends up being a lot more substantial than regular metal flake. There's just more going on that makes this work. Because without light, it's subtle. And with light, it stands out like crazy. So now the final touch, let's put the gray phone in the gray case. So you can see the edges all the way around the front are super shiny. This is a total shot in the dark whether or not this is actually going to work, and I mean it looks awesome. Just considering that this didn't actually cost me anything because I already had all of the supplies for it. So this was literally just like a free side project. Took 1 day to actually like make everything work, and then it just sat for 4 days while the clear coat cured. I love how this came out, and I actually don't even want to shop for a new case now, so theoretically I actually just saved myself 50 bucks by doing this. But in the sense of the job this case now has, is I have to go record some videos for my other channel, the Hate Me Club. So I'm gonna go destroy this case in the garage while I go work on some cars. So if you're into cars, go check that channel out. If not, it's all good. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already. You can join the members program if you want to help support the channel, or don't do any of it. I'm not telling you what to do.